Chris is going to bring us the last of his messages for us in a moment. So, God, we ask that in your written word, we would meet your living word, Jesus. Amen. From the Revelation to St. John, chapter 12, verses 1 to 17. The end time. That day has come. A great sign appeared in heaven. A woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and a crown of 12 stars on her head. She was pregnant, and she cried out in pain as she was about to give birth. And then another sign appeared in the heaven, an enormous red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns on its heads. Its tail swept a third of the stars out of the sky and flung them to the earth. The dragon stood in front of the woman who was about to give birth, so that it might devour her child the moment it was born. She gave birth to a son, a male child, who will rule all the nations with an iron scepter. And her child was snatched up to God and to his throne. The woman fled into the wilderness to a place prepared for her by God, where she might be taken care of for 1,260 days. And then war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought back, but he was not strong enough, and they lost their place in heaven. The great dragon was hurled down, that ancient serpent called the devil or Satan, who leads the whole world astray. He was hurled to the earth, and his angels with him. This is the word of the Lord for us today. Amen.
Good morning. Thank you for this opportunity and this wonderful privilege to bring God's word to you at this time. If I can please have this next slide. Yes. I was in two minds on whether to put this up while the Bible reading was happening, especially the next one, which we'll go to in a minute, to help you understand, because the book of Revelation is understandably a very underused, underpreached book. It's not that easy. And so I brought some imagery to help you and help all of us when we try to understand what God is saying for us today in our context in 2021. But what I brought you, if we can just go back, please. So what I brought you is some artwork from two very accomplished artists. On your left-hand side, a self-portrait of Albrecht Dürer, most famous for his praying hands statue, and then, of course, lots and lots of wood carvings, including 16 artworks carved from wood in 1498, depicting the visions from the book of Revelation. If you want to see them, don't Google them. Go to South Bank. The art gallery just bought the whole set. We were there on Thursday. It's fantastic to see them, 500-year-old prints there that he did himself with his own hands. That's Albrecht Dürer. Then Frederick Voisin, a French artist I stumbled upon in Reims, which is just north of Paris, at a cathedral, and he did a modernist interpretation of the same imagery, strongly inspired by Albrecht Dürer, in pewter, and then did these color prints. So what you're going to see in a minute will be two of those prints of today's reading that I want you to appreciate and understand. If we can now go to the next slide, please. Thanks, Lee. The book of Revelation is apocalyptic literature. Apocalyptic literature, often we think end times, we think disaster. It's not. Don't think Apocalypse Now like the movie. Apocalyptic literature is opening up, God revealing. It's revelationary material. That's why the book is called Revelation. It's the opening up of God's vision and God's plan. So what you have in the book of Revelation is not a linear story. It is like a drama telling you the same story, the history of the world, several times. Several times. So you get the story. And the numbers are incredibly important. So 7 seals, 7 trumpets, etc. But you get the story told from the perspective of how it's really tough for Christ followers. You get the story to help those who wonder whether God will ever deal with the non-believers, and retell the whole story again. The story is retold several times. Where we're focusing today is in chapter 12 to 14. The way he describes it is a character called Satan. There's actually two characters like that in the book of Revelation, in 12 and 13. But it's a dragon, and then a woman, the church, and a son that's born out of the faith community, which we've read about. So what you don't want to do when you're listening to the book of Revelation is ask, does this literally mean that? Does that mean that? Does that mean... You need to understand what the author is trying to do. The author is writing to the people of God in a persecuted time, in a very, very tough time, when they spent, every week they spent having a funeral. Someone during Nero's persecution died. So they were standing next to graves all the time. Kind of what's happening in India at the moment and in other places. People thinking, this is the end of the world. It is the biggest disaster of our lifetimes. That's what Nero did to them. So part of John's writing is to say, I'm bringing a message of hope and comfort when people are thinking the world is at an end. So why does he write in such strange language? A little diversion. Because the texts of the Bible were being destroyed. If they found you anywhere with a copy of Matthew's Gospel and a Roman soldier read it and he saw the name Jesus, tear it up. He finds you and he sees you reading this fable that looks like a children's story with dragons and stuff in it, he lets you go through. It was a way to get the Gospel, the book of Revelation, to all the 7 communities all over Asia. But it had hidden language. And the reason why we struggle to understand it today is because we don't know our Old Testament well enough. You want to understand any of the symbols in a Revelation, go look at the Old Testament first, not to all the doom and gloom preachers on YouTube. Go to the Old Testament. That's where you go. And then you'll find that the book of Daniel and all other kind of stuff comes back, and it'll be understandable to Jews, but not to Romans. That's part of the secret of the book of Revelation. So in this story, can we now please go to the next one? I want to show you, I'm hoping you're not sitting in the back cheap seats, because please move forward if you can't see this. This is Frederick Voisin's newer interpretation, and there's some small differences in color. This one is Albrecht Dürer, so this is a print of a 1498 wood carving. That's what you're seeing there, and that's what's in the museum, in the art gallery in South Bank. So some of the elements you've just heard in the Bible reading. There's a dragon that comes up, 7 heads. 7 is the godly number. He's imitating God. But he's got 10 horns, the 10 nations, the enemies. He's not really God. This is the Roman Empire. This is the enemy. This is what John is warning about, that when you're scared, you have reason to be scared. Because with one swing of his tail, he takes a third of the stars with him. What is a third? It's not half. It's significant, but not even half. He's sowing destruction, but it's not the end of the world. He's got 10 crowns, which gives him away and says, don't look at the 7 horns. He's not God. It's the Roman Empire. And then there's this woman who's about to give birth. This is the people of God. Today we would say the church. Right. Back then it was this forming community out of the Israel and the Gentiles coming together, the people of God, and out of the people of God, she's got wings so she can fly away to protect her. The wings in Old Testament times, often the eagles, God's way of taking people away, wings of eagles, protecting them, helping them. But she stands on a bit of the moon because those stuff you other guys worship, well, they're just there to support the church. We're standing on that. We need that as a footstool. But she gives birth, and then just above her head you can see, just as the baby's born, and the dragon wants to swallow up the baby, he's pulled away to the throne. The dragon has a last attempt by pouring water, spewing out water to wash him away. Think Moses, think the Saviour sent by God to rescue the people. Think the role of the river. Think the stream of water trying to kill, but eventually he gets saved. Think resurrection. Think death and resurrection. Think almost won, but in the end, Christ won and went up to be with God. Right? So in Frederick Voisin's version, he goes a bit further in his elaboration. You'll see he does 3 tails for the dragon, the false trinity. He does a few extra things there that's interesting. But I wanted you to just see that little detour again. At the bottom, there's his signature. Apparently the first artist in history to put his signature at the bottom of artworks. Albrecht Dürer, there in the middle. So Frederick Voisin does the same. There's a bit of background. Now, if we can go, next slide, please. I just wanted to pop that in. That was Thursday. Thursday, Henriette and I standing there. That is a 500-year-old piece of paper, printed by Albrecht Dürer himself on the Gutenberg press. Next one, please. So if you can't see that, don't worry. My notes are always there for those who fall asleep. And when you get away, when you come back, you've caught up. And you can just read and say, oh, what I've missed, I can catch up. So, the Alpha and the Omega. This is God's story, unfolding. And John retells the story again and again from different perspectives. Like, think of a movie about the Second World War, and you have it in an artistic version. You have another one in a postmodern version. You have another one in a very accurate historical version. You have one that's very much propaganda. It's the same story, but in different genres. So that's what John is doing, giving you the same story, and in 12 to 14, he's responding to, I know it's desperate. I know you think it's the end of the world. I know that Nero's persecution makes you feel we're going to be wiped out and all killed. Think the year 1999. We were all frantically buying software because our computers are going to crash. It's the end of the millennium. It's the end of the world. Planes are going to fall from the sky. Let's not book planes on 31st of December. Well, in 1498, Albrecht Dürer said, the world is panicking. I will make these wood carvings to help people see these visions and understand that God has control. That the world, the universe, God's creation is not spinning out of control. There is control. There is order. And the chaos you see is not as bad as you think. If history was 7 years in his telling, again, 777 everywhere, if the totality of history is 7 years, 3.5 years into it, halfway in, comes the Christ. Christ, and that 3.5 or years and a half comes again and again in the story. Halfway through history, the midpoint of history, is the birth of Christ. There's 3.5 more left. Or, in this passage, 1,260 days. Why 1,200? It's 3.5 years. But when you're struggling and you're suffering, it doesn't feel like 3.5 years. It feels like 1,260 days. So it's the emotional value of when we're struggling, when it's tough, when we think, will we ever get out of COVID? Will this destroy our life as we know it? What have we lost and how much have we lost? This story is saying, do not give up hope. It's not out of control. It is not spinning to nowhere. It's not all collapsing. God is actually giving you hope And even though it looks like the dragon is going to devour the child, God intervenes. And there is a different plan and a different way for things to work out. And that's why there's a reason for joy. Because he says, in heaven they were rejoicing. Remember the bit about the archangel and Michael? And in heaven they were rejoicing, but on earth they were crying because there was suffering because of the dragon. But that suffering will end. And the suffering is measured. 1,260 days. It will be over. The hardship and the time of hardship will be over. So this is a strong message of comfort for the people in New Testament times, for the people in 1498, for the people in 1999, for the people in COVID-19. A message to say it's not out of control. It's not the end of the world. Things are not as bad as they seem or look. You go and read some of the alternative literature today, and you'll find that we have never in history had less people die of war than we have at the moment. Never. Despite what Facebook is telling you, or news bulletins, we've never had less war. We've never had less people die of illness. We've never had. You know how many people died in Australia last year because of flu? In the whole of Australia, 25 million people? 2. Oh, that's not front page news. 2 people died of flu. It's a miracle. This is not the end of the world. And then we get to what I think is the key point of the story. So the woman gives birth. Out of the faith community comes the Messiah, comes the Christ. That's where the hope comes from. That's the source of hope. And even though the woman will suffer and struggle and she has wings like eagles. She'll get away. She'll survive. She'll make it through the 1,260 days because she has been the source of the hope where the Messiah came from. The church, in this scenario, where everyone thinks it's the end of the world, where people think it can't be worse, the church needs to be the source of hope. And that is my message to you today. That if you, as the folks who make up the church, not this building, these folks, if you lose hope, then hope is lost. This story retells the story of creation, saying that if the church is not the source of hope, then who else will be? The false dragon pretending to be God? Or the people of God? Don't get sucked in. Don't be part of the gloom and doom. Be the people that bring the joy, that share the joy, that bring the good news story. A friend of mine used to always say, whatever you're preaching, whatever you're doing, always ask, where's the good news in this? Because we are the people of the gospel, the people of the good news. That's who we are, not the people of despair. We don't need to contribute to the despair. It's on every channel on TV. It's on the news. It's in Twitter and it's on Facebook. We are the people of hope. And this is the story of Revelation unfolding again and again. There will be tough times. There will be times when we want to lose hope. The source of hope is the Messiah. And the Messiah was born through the church, through the people of God. Be those people. And I hope to be one of those people till the day I die. Retirement isn't the end. It's, my demise has been greatly exaggerated, as someone once said. I've already got supply hooked up in birth. I will be preaching this message till the end of my time, that we are the people of hope. But for that to be true in the world, we need to believe it ourselves and be those people that communicate that bring that hope to people in the world. God bless you as you do this. I know that you are part of the woman. You are part of that image of bringing hope to the world. God bless you all.